If you are watching on Facebook and you're like, why are his clothes on backwards? Then that's why, because it is backward night. And that is one word text. That's okay. That's no problem. Not a problem at all. So it's backward night. And a couple weeks ago, or not a couple weeks ago, last week, we started this series called Life is a Journey. And we simply looked at this idea that we are on a journey in life and we belong on this journey. And my one point for you guys last week was simply this: you belong, don't give up. You belong where you are right now on this journey. God created you to be alive in 2021 at the age you're at with the friends you have so that you could do stuff for his kingdom. You belong here. Don't give up. Even though times can get difficult and hard, stay on the journey. Stay on the journey. And this week, I want to get right to the point. All right, I'm going to give you my point up front this week so you know exactly where I'm headed. It's this: you have some gifts. You have some gifts that have been given you along this journey that God has given you to do some awesome things for his kingdom. Look at what it says here in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Now, there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are a variety of services, but the same Lord. And there are a variety of activities, but it is in the same God who empowers them all to everyone. We have some gifts. I told you guys last week I would share with you some stories of some journeys that I've been on. And one of the journeys that I started a few years back, more than a few years back, but a few years back, was being a soccer coach. I never really intended to be a soccer coach. Brinkley joined soccer, and so that first season we cheered him on, and we're those parents that like scream from the sidelines and get all excited. And so we were cheering Brinkley on, and I was excitedly encouraging him. And then Clark jumped in soccer, and then at the end of the season, there was a time where the coach couldn't be at one of the games, and so he asked me to jump in and coach the game. And I was like, I don't know about all that. Like, I played soccer a little bit. I wasn't great at it. I'm not sure about this whole coaching thing. And so I reluctantly agreed because he asked so kindly, and I loved it. I absolutely loved encouraging the kids. I absolutely loved helping them get in position. I loved encouraging them to do what they're supposed to do. I loved encouraging them to go down and score goals. I just loved every aspect of it. And so the next season, when Brinkley and Clark signed up to play soccer, which I think I have some pictures of them playing soccer. There we go. There's Brinkley when he was a little guy, and Clark, and then Tate and Luna. They were little guys too, but they're still little guys. And so over the last 7 years, I've coached anywhere from one to, I don't think I've ever coached 3 teams, but I've coached 2 teams. I try to coach as many of our kids as possible in soccer because I absolutely love it. Now, one of my favorite things about soccer is when a new kid steps onto the field and I am able to help them find their place on the soccer field. I'm able to help them find the position where they can just thrive and go out and do the very best that they can do. It is one of my absolute favorite parts of coaching. And what happens often is, and our first game was today. Yes, we have YMCA soccer shirts on. Our first game was today, and this happened last practice, and it happened today. We have 3 or 4 kids on our team that have never played soccer before. And so they nervously walk out onto the soccer field, and they're like, all right, I've been to a practice or 2. I still have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if I should even be playing this sport. I don't know if this is where I should be, but I'm here. And you can see it all over their face that they're just like, all right, what am I in for? And oftentimes, I think that is where we stand in our faith. I think we stand right there in our faith. We're like, okay, maybe we've made a decision and we're like, all right, yes, I follow Jesus. And we step out onto the field. Maybe we're not sure, but we're kind of stepping out onto the field just to kind of see what's going on with this whole Jesus thing. But either way, I think so often, whether you are just starting to follow Jesus or whether you have been following Jesus for years, you find yourself in this position often in your faith where you step into your faith and you're like, okay, like, I think I'm supposed to be out here on the field. I think I'm supposed to be participating, but I don't really know what to do. I don't really know what I have to offer. And the truth is, you are a part of the team. The truth is that you have something to offer for this thing called faith. The truth is that God has given you gifts, and God has given you abilities, and God has given you talents so that you can go out and you can live out your faith. And the best possible life we can live is when we truly live our faith. I love it when a soccer player goes out and they find their spot and they just thrive in it. And that's what Paul is talking about here in 1 Corinthians. If you go back in 1 Corinthians, Paul is talking all about spiritual gifts. In the beginning of chapter 12, like he goes through this list of spiritual gifts, and he starts out the chapter and he says, now listen, I want to tell you about spiritual gifts so that you're not informed, so that you are informed, right? Like we're new to the faith, we're out on the field, we're the new people, and he's like, I want you to know about spiritual gifts. And then he says this, after he gives this list, well, before he gives this list, he says there's a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. There's a variety of service, but the same Lord. There are a variety of activities. And then he gives this list of what the spiritual gifts are. Now, I am convinced that this list of spiritual gifts that he gives is not an exhausting list. This is just from my own head. Some people will argue with me and say, no, what Paul says are spiritual gifts. Those are the spiritual gifts. You got to stick with those spiritual gifts. But, and again, check me on this because this is from my own head. I think that Paul gave a few examples, and this list that he gave was far from exhaustive on the spiritual gift side of things. I think there are all kinds of spiritual gifts, and here's why I think that. Because before he gives the list, he says, I'm sorry, Shannon, I'm jumping around a lot. Go back to that previous verse. He says, there's a variety of gifts. There's a variety of service. There's a variety of activities. There's all these things that we can do for God's kingdom. There's all these things that God has given us so that we can go out and we can serve Him, so we can step onto the field and we can be confident in what we have and what we are and what our gifts are, and we can go out and we can serve God. And then he gives this list. And then after he gives the list, and this is another thing that convinces me this list is not exhaustive, he says this in verse 12, just as a body, though one has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. He's saying this. We are all one body. Everyone belongs. Everyone belongs. There's a variety of gifts. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone has gifts. And he goes into this long dialogue, which we won't talk a whole lot about, but he's like, everyone belongs to the body. It wouldn't do any good for the foot to say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body. Well, no, we need our feet, It wouldn't do any good for, our nose to say, well, I'm not a mouth, so I guess I don't belong. We need our nose. We need our parts of our bodies. And he goes into this long dialogue about how every single part of the body is important, and every single person that is a part of the body of Christ, that's you guys, has a purpose and a value and is important and has some gifts to offer. And so the main question then is, how do we figure out what our spiritual gifts are? How do we figure out what our spiritual gifts are? I love it as a soccer coach. when we get like 2 games into the season. Because at about 2 games into the season, I've moved some people around and I've tried them in some different various positions. And I've kind of figured out, all right, Brinkley's really good at defense. And Audrey's back there somewhere. Audrey's been on my team before. Audrey is really good at midfield. And what I do is I start to play them in those spots. And then when they do awesome in that spot, like I scream from the sideline, yeah, that's it. Good job. Keep going. And they start to thrive in those positions. And other teams start to notice, man, they are really good in that spot. And suddenly our team, who didn't know each other at the beginning of the season, becomes this unified body by the end of the season and actually does really, really well. Now, Brinkley and Audrey will tell you, first part of the season, we don't win a lot of games because we are trying to figure out who fits where and who does what best, and we're trying to make sure that everybody comes along together. But by the end of the season, even though we have not won many games, when the tournament rolls around, we always are in there with a shot to win the tournament. Every year, we end up playing the team that is like won every single game in the season. And every year, we take it to them, and it is close to the final minute when we are within scoring distance of being able to beat them. One year, it went down to a shootout, and we beat the team. We hadn't won a game all season long, but all season long, I'd been working on people in their positions and getting them where they need to go. And we got to that final game, and it went to a shootout, and we won. And this team was just shocked that we had beat them. But our team had come together. And what Paul is saying here is we have some gifts. We can come together, and we don't have to be ashamed to be like, well, man, I'm not, someone that is good at whatever, so I shouldn't be a part of it. Guys, that's the way I used to think. That's when I was in middle school and high school, I looked at myself, and I know this is probably hard to believe because I'm on stage standing in clothes, wearing them completely backward. But in middle school and especially the early part of high school, I was super shy. Super, super shy. And I was nervous and I was anxious and I wasn't the type of person that would be on stage. I wasn't the type of person that was going to go out and was going to do massive big things and have all this recognition. I wasn't the type of person that I looked at other people and saw all the things that they were doing, and I looked at other people and I saw who they were, and I thought, man, if that is the type of person that makes a difference for Jesus, that's not me. So I don't have anything to offer. And Paul is very specific. Paul is very specific, and he says, everyone has something to offer. And something happened right in the middle of middle school, early high school, where I started to realize, you know what, I may be shy, and I may be anxious, and I may be awkward, and I may not fit, but I still have something to offer. And when we can live that out, it doesn't mean that you'll end up on stage someday, but it does mean that you will make a difference for God's kingdom right where you're at. Right where you're at. And there are moments that I can look back in middle school and high school where I was able to make a difference in people's lives because God allowed me to use the gifts that I had. And God wants you to use your gifts as well. And so how do we discover our spiritual gifts? First, don't limit your idea of what a spiritual gift is. I think this is the biggest detriment that we do as Christians is we limit spiritual gifts. We limit spiritual gifts to things that are on stage, to things that are lots of recognition, someone that raises a lot of money, someone that goes on a huge mission trip, that does these big things for God's kingdom. Don't limit your definition of spiritual gifts or your idea to spiritual gifts to something that is super spiritual. Here's the deal, guys. Paul says there's a variety of gifts, there's a variety of activities, there's a variety of things that you can use for God's kingdom. And so let's not limit it. First, out the gate, don't limit your idea of what a spiritual gift is. Now, granted, if you're saying a spiritual gift is something that God obviously says is wrong, it's probably not a spiritual gift. Don't go do that, right? But don't limit your idea of what a spiritual gift is. Number 2, look at the things that you love. What is it that you love? Some of you love music. Some of you love art. Some of you love video games. Some of you love making people laugh. My son Tate, back there in the back, he loves making people laugh. And I am convinced that is his spiritual gift. Every time he sits down at the table, he's got a joke to tell us. And I am convinced that God gives spiritual gifts of comedy. God gives spiritual gifts of sports and athletics. God gives spiritual gifts of a hard work ethic, or gardening, or drawing, or crocheting, or knitting, or crafting, or whatever you may love. You can look at that, and that's probably something God has given you as a spiritual gift to use for his kingdom. How wide does that make our idea of what spiritual gifts are? That's pretty incredible. And the third thing is this: pay attention to what people say you're good at. What is it that people are telling you that you're good at? Instead of being like, oh, there's someone so much better than me, or just shrugging it off. What is it that people say, wow, man, you are really good at that? And just go out and do that. And perfect that craft, perfect that art. Some people are really good at mechanical work. And I've seen time and time and time again where they use that mechanical work for God's kingdom. Some people are really good at cooking and baking. And I've seen them use that time and time again for God's kingdom. And the list goes on and on. What is it that you're good at? What is it that people look at you and they say, man, you are really good at that? Now, we're going to talk more about how to use our gifts for God's kingdom next week, but I really wanted to just narrow it down and say, all right, you have some gifts, what are they? Because when we can understand what our gifts are and we aren't trying to be something that we're not, we will make a difference for God's kingdom. When Brinkley understands he is good as a defender on the soccer field and he's not trying to go out and be a forward and score the goals, our team thrives and does so much better. And when we can understand that we are who God created us to be with some gifts and some talents, then we can help the body of Christ thrive. And so I give a practical challenge every week, and we'll give another one this week right up here on stage. And afterward, I'll put this out on the free table, and it'll be out there for the next few weeks as a thing that just says, my spiritual gifts. And it's got 50 slots because we're not going to limit our idea of what a spiritual gift is. 25 slots for what are the things that I love, and 25 slots for what are the things that people say I'm good at. And I want you to just sit down sometime and write down, hey, these are my spiritual gifts. These are the things that God can use for his kingdom. Because we are gifted, and God created us with a purpose right here, right now, where we live, in our friendship groups and in our circles. You have a gift on this journey. Check this out.